It's always struck me as being kind of odd that our entire experience of reality from the day we're born to the day we die only occurs to us with the participation of our mind. If our mind wasn't involved in it, we would have no experience of reality. So mind is intrinsically involved in everything we do. So that's kind of fairly obvious. But you ask most people, well, given how important mind is, what is your mind exactly? Most people will stare at you as though you're, with completely blank expressions. They've got no idea what mind is. And yet it's so important. It's like central to everything in our entire life, which is bizarre when you think about it. You spend so much time focusing on investments and money and this and that, but really it's kind of almost peripheral instead of focusing on the main deal. Okay, right. So Buddhism is entirely dedicated and devoted to a study of the mind and the study of consciousness. And the Buddhist definition of mind is a formless continuum of clarity and cognition. So a formless continuum of clarity and cognition. That may or may not mean anything to anybody, and it requires a lot of unpacking and explanation because every single one of those words has multidimensional meanings. Right. But of far more importance than the kind of conceptual understanding of mind that I've just explained is the non-conceptual experience of mind. A couple of years ago, I was watching this documentary about cocoa plantation workers in Africa, which may seem a very odd thing to bring into this conversation. But what made it really interesting is that these people have been working for years on cocoa plantations, picking the little brown beans that get eventually beans that get turned into chocolate. But none of them had ever tasted chocolate because they lived in Africa. But the thing that made it interesting in this documentary was that the documentary makers had brought lots and lots of bars of chocolate with them. And so the thing is that these workers knew all about chocolate. They knew that chocolate was sweet, it was brown, it was quite hard, but when you bit into it, it melted in your mouth, and it came in a variety of flavors. They had all the ideas and concepts and notions about chocolate down pat, but they'd never eaten it. And so these documentary makers had their, cameras closely panned in on their faces as these guys took their very first bites of chocolate. And their faces just lit up, as you can imagine, their first taste of chocolate. And what was really interesting about that is that at that moment of biting into that chocolate, all their ideas and their concepts and notions about chocolate that they'd evolved over the years became meaningless, secondary, irrelevant almost, because now they knew from personal direct experience what chocolate really tastes like. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with our mind, in that having a conceptual understanding that mind is a formless continuum of clarity and cognition, etc., is all very well and good, but of far more use to us personally is experiencing directly for ourselves the nature of our own consciousness. And Buddhism provides us with the tools for that through meditating. And there are specific meditation techniques we can use where we can encounter the nature of our own minds directly and firsthand for ourselves. And when we do that, we discover that our own mind is quite naturally boundless, it's clear, and it has a wonderfully tranquil or peaceful feel about it, which the more you practice it actually develops into a state of abiding and ever-increasing bliss. And so it's an amazing thing that we don't actually need to go out there and run around and fabricate and manufacture stuff in order to be happy. Our happiness already is within us. All we need to do is learn the tools to get into it. And there's a wonderful little metaphor about how if you told a very poor family living in a mud hut somewhere that just beneath the surface of their hut there's this cask of gold and jewels, what do you think the poor family would do? Well, in a short space of time, they'd be removing all the dirt and getting to the good stuff. And it's the same with our minds. That's a metaphor for us. We may not be materially poor, but in a sense of understanding the nature of consciousness, we have beneath the surface, beneath the obscurations of our mind, the most astonishing treasure. And all we need to do is to tap into that treasure, and we can do that through meditation. And so I guess if I was to summarize what Tibetan Buddhism has taught me about consciousness, it is this tremendous thing that we all possess, which is this mind, which is enduring, and which is a source of such amazing contentment and well-being. And it's there all the time. We can tap into it whenever we like.